Bonjour Sarah.
Bonjour monsieur.
Encore 5 minutes et on commence. À vous, Sarah.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all back to this afternoon session of the 5th edition of the International Conference on Technology, Communication, and Creativity. And our session this afternoon is going to be divided into two sections. The first section, our presenters are going to deal with the integration of technology and the shift within Moroccan education towards using technology. And the second section of this panel is going to be dedicated to the integration of soft skills into the folds of Moroccan education and the Moroccan university more specifically. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our first presenter, Professor Nasera Houat, who is going to present on the topic of disruption as a catalyst for change, the effects of COVID-19 on students' perceptions of online course design. Professor Houat, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, Professor, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah, for this introduction. And I will welcome all the attendees. And I'm very pleased to participate in this conference. This is becoming more and more my home. And today I'm going to tell you the story of my own practice in terms of mutation and changing our course design because of the pandemic COVID-19. So I'm going first to talk about disruption and then shift to my own practice and investigation on my own practice. So first of all, I will give you the outline of my presentation, why disruption, definition, and my aim of my research, the background theory, which is the learner experience design that I have implemented in my course online, the method that I have based my methodological approach, the user experience design learning, the honeycomb approach. Then I will expose the result of my investigation and then set up with the conclusion, inshallah. So I will start with this quotation of George Siemens, who said that the best strategy in a time of uncertainty is not to seek or force the way forward, but simply to enter in a cycle of experimentation. So Siemens is encouraging professors to take risks and innovate with new things in terms of uncertainty and in terms of crisis. So what is disruption? Recently, we have been, researchers around the world have been advancing this term, particularly in the time of a crisis. So this disruption is, if you go to dictionary, is the new way of doing things, which is not mutation, but it's an abrupt cut from the old tradition. And people are forced to start new method because of some circumstances, crises, and risks. And so they are defining disruption in terms of phases. So I think that all online designers or course who deliver courses on platforms or online, they have been passed through these 3 phases. So in the first we have this unsettled zone. It's the first phase of disruption, where we are still living in the unknown. and we don't know how we are going to proceed, which stage are going to be compatible with our system. So we are in the period of questioning, testing. Then we set up with the second phase of disruption, which is the starting of the learning. This is the zone, the starting of being not chaotic, but to deal with uncertainty. Then we mutate or we transit into the third zone, which is the growth. So here disruption had, urged innovators or teachers who are delivering their content online into learning from the lessons of the COVID and learning from the lessons of crisis. And then they seek for a future or a zone which we can innovate, and we can make research on our own practice, and we can hopefully improve our practice. And all these phases are passed through resilience. Without resilience, we cannot, establish these three mutated phases in disruption. Disruption also deals with uncertainty. It's a rapid change in speed of decision during crisis, in which courses can be put, or design can be put provisional, flexible, and can be adaptable. So here we have to include also innovation, self-regulation, collaboration, and self-organization in terms of learner and instructors. So we believe that we have to shift in our mindset, especially vis-a-vis the course design. So great emphasis will be put on the cognitive, the emotional, the behavioral, and the socially dynamic learning ecosystem. So we call this integrated course design. So my aim of this research is, what are the UNCGO students' perception with respect to the pedagogical usefulness, usability of the Moodle e-learning environment, and how might we create useful online learning experience? So the theoretical framework I have based on is the learning experience design theory, advanced recently by both Simon and Lee Howells during after the COVID, they have come up with this theory because it matches these times of crisis. And the second approach is the user experience, a honeycomb design permitted by Morville and Zen in 2017. It's a widely accepted framework that draws on user experience design to create valuable user experience. So the learning experience design here is iterative framework in which it passes through these 4 principles. The course design should be relevant. I should always ask, what are my learners' needs, and what we hope to do, and how am I going to impact their success? I should also question the experience. What will be their experience? Participation, again, is a very important principle in learner experience design, and also, the applicability, practice. Also here we have this, what we call flexible iterative design, in which the teacher is undergoing what we call iterative process. Yes, he decided about his course design, he planned for his course design, and he reflects, but then he's not going to do this by himself. He's going to involve the learners, he's going to involve their needs, and then if the learners are going to be co-designers with him, the course will be changing over the changing of their needs. So here he should diverse all the activities in e-learning activities. He should also change the principle, change the articulation, change the feedback, and the support is usually with coaching. The user experience design involves gathering, incorporating in user input behavior to design experience that they found valuable. So the design is going to be holistic and integrated. Why? Because it's going to shift from fragmentation to integration. What is the input and how this input is going to be processed in the brain of my learners, and what is the input? So as I said before, the learner experience design is going to be integrated into 4 principles or more. It is a holistic approach, which include the emotional design, the participatory design, and design thinking. It matches very good with design thinking and visual and aesthetic design. I have tried to implement all these types of design in my course through making some functionalities of the Moodle platform. For instance, I have created a forum for coaching just to respond this emotional connection with my learner. I have also implemented these tools, wiki collaborative project, interaction with my students and giving them feedback through the forum. This is for participatory design, in which also they collaborate on the glossary. And then I matches this design with design thinking. Why? Because my learners are going to involve in my course design by changing and giving their suggestion concerning the course. And then the visual aesthetic dimension is also very important to keep the course very simple and the interface very ergonomic. So design thinking in my course is I'm going here to just to give you this 5 principles of design thinking. The question to ask, what are my students' needs? I have to connect topics that are with real life, deal with real life situations that have value and relevance to reality. Then empathy, how much I'm going to show empathy with my students, and how ideation, I write new ideas, collaborate with them, and they are going to brainstorm. Testing, what lesson can you design that implement the ideas that can stimulate engagement? Prototyping, what activities can you design to develop new ideas? So all these principles, I share it with my learners, and they integrate in the course, and they can give their voice and their suggestion for my course. I have opened this Canva, what we call Open Learning Canva. I have opened it in the wiki in Moodle, inside Moodle, and so that I can allow my students to contribute in the changing of the course design. So it is iterative. My course, by the way, I am a teacher of business English at l'ENCG, and the rationale or my motivation behind choosing this, because I have encountered some problems with my students. They are semester 7 at l'ENCG, and they are studying 3 different disciplines. So we have option finance, we have the option of international commerce, and another option who deal with management. So each group of students have different needs. That's why I have adopted this design to cater and to respond to all the needs of my students. So here we have been iterating with the course. Sometimes we deal with business trending English topics, then the job awareness course, self-awareness, and practicing how to practice entrepreneurship skills. So all these topics have been iterated each time in my course. These are some visuals, some extract of my course of self-awareness, which I dealt with some, for instance, tools that help them to categorize and discover their personality traits. This is again another example how the learner instructor interacts through the forum of coaching. Now we go to the research. My research was on perception, and these are some topics that have been dealt recently with some researchers about perception during the COVID. They deal with technology acceptance, self-efficacy, ease of use, complexity, behavioral intention, academic gestures, academic stress. All these topics have been dealt in the review of literature. And this is my methodological approach. I have adopted it. It's the user experience design learning, the honeycomb approach. It deals with all these principles: usefulness, usability, disability, valuableness, findable, accessible, and credibility. So I have designed my questionnaire and my interview, which matches this and align with this approach. So the questionnaire have been based on this perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, perceived credibility, disability, and the perceived value of the course. So these are types of questions that have been of my questionnaire and also of my in-depth interview. So I had adopted the mixed method, quantitative one, depending on the survey, and Likert type measurements. Then I have dealt with in-depth interviews with my students on focus group, this qualitative one, and then I have extracted some data from the platform of my course. So these are the prominent themes that have been shown by the investigation, and they are aligned with this principle of user experience design learning. Modes of the delivery, modes of design, flexibility, usability, affective design, and humanized learning, and credibility. This framework suggests that for online experience to be valuable, it should be useful, desirable, usable, findable, accessible, and credible. So participants are from Learn CG, they are my students, and this is the demographic distribution. As I told you before, I had problem what to choose for my topics of teaching, because we have many options. So each group of, for instance, group of finance, they need to know more vocabulary about finance, more courses about finance, and we have seen here also this management and auditing. They are the majority. They choose this option, and we have also international commerce. The usefulness, the graph shows that 67% of my students found the course useful, and 69% approximately find the course credible. For ease of use, 81% found it accessible and simple and easy. For the course materials, do you easily find the course materials findable? The majority, they say yes. And does it respond to your needs? We have 69. Is it relevant to your future job? The majority say yes. So does the course design show any emotional connection? Here, the Likert type measurement show that positive, yes, it was concerning the social interaction. I have noticed that my students, they prefer the forum cafe and the coaching corner, and we can explain this. No, not the coaching, the forum cafe discussion and the group discussion, and we can remember that students were isolated, so they prefer discussing, interacting with their colleagues and also with their teacher. So these are for some extracts from my in-depth interview with them. They see that it was very pleasant. I started joining forums, and it reminds me that I found it very easy and pleasant. It's funny, we to interact easily. When they say that the course was very easy. Concerning the perception of collaborative learning, my students, they prefer asynchronous because I have implemented many types of forums, so it allows them to discuss it when they were isolated. It allows them to be more interactive with their colleagues. Synchronous, which type of platform do you prefer? Do you see here? It's visible. They prefer chat rooms. They prefer also the course in big blue button. Which type of platform tools in asynchronous? They like mostly the videos and the PowerPoint presentation because it is related to the course, and then the quizzes and the forum and the glossary. Now, the self-awareness functionality was in the coaching forum, and for concerning the interview,
I'm sorry to cut you off. You have 1 minute left.
Okay, just they perceive that the coaching forum has helped them in assisting their understanding of other points of view, in overcoming stress and isolation. It motivates them because of the teacher feedback, and they also helped me to overcome my stress. There's some extracts from the interview. For collaboration, they agree. They perceive it as a positive experience. Concerning the problems, it was, technical. There are some technical problems, some difficulty with some tools, and some group conflicts. I will go directly to their suggestion. They suggest flexible platforms. They suggest maximizing videos, interactive resources, synchronic meetings. They suggest use of cameras from the part of their teacher and also from the part of their colleagues. And they need short PowerPoint presentation. I will conclude, if you permit, with that useful design, therefore, aims to reduce unnecessary cognitive processing and cognitive load. We should foster skills, learning by doing, and creative activities. We should erase the distance between learner and instructor. We should involve our learner in our course design, and we should connect emotionally with our learner. Finally, some perspectives for emerging learning. We should reprioritize the curriculum to embrace a wider range of cognitive, emotional, social skills. We need new version of flexible platforms. We can learn as you go with the mobile, huge needs to just-in-time or micro-learning, and we need, of course, flexible platform as my students suggested. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for this very informative presentation. Just to shortly, very briefly reiterate, Professor Houat's presentation dealt mainly with the best designs and the best conceptual and theoretical frameworks to integrate technology into education. She first began by evoking the notion of experimentation and how it is key in this time of changing and mutation in education. She spoke of the concept of disruption and the multiple phases that both learner and teacher go through when this event of this disruptive event occurs. And she encouraged and highlighted the need for mind shift within Moroccan education, specifically a need to put the student at the center of the learning experience from course design all the way to course implementation. She shared with us the results of her research on perceptions of her students at l'UNCG Oujda. Most students, the results of the research show that most students found the use of the Moodle platform useful, valuable. They found that there is an ease of use, credibility, and they very much appreciated the social interaction that was afforded to them after almost 3 years of being in quarantine with COVID. So I think I managed to briefly summarize Professor Houat's presentation. I invite everyone, whoever has a question, to leave it in the chat box for the professor, as we will go back to them at the end of the first 3 presentations. So without losing time, I now give the floor to Professor Assia Bouali. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for giving me the floor. Mr. the Chairman, distinguished professors, academics, educationals, PhDers, and students and participants. It is indeed an honor for me and privilege to address this speech at the 5th edition of the International Conference on Technologies, Education, and Creativity. Let me start first, actually, by expressing my deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for inviting me to take part in this amazing academic and educational event. You cannot really imagine how glad, how thankful, how grateful I am to be back again to this laboratory, the presence of my outstanding professors. My feelings and emotions are really beyond words and descriptions. So as you can see from the title of my presentation, it deals actually with the perceptions of higher educational actors towards technology and its usage in their teaching practices. This here is flipped learning. During this presentation, I will try to, During this presentation, I will try to stick to the following outline, starting first and foremost by an overview of the actual context of education in the digital age. Moving on to tackle the definition of flipped learning and is essential for the implementation to successfully occur. Shedding the light later on flipped learning and SHAC methodology used by professors to encourage collaboration in SHAC and student-centeredness. After that, I will be dealing with investigating the effects this approach has on self-perceived competency and attitudes of higher educational actors while teaching in such an environment. And I will finish by a conclusion that summarizes all the research that's been made before. Indeed, technology has become increasingly integrated in our daily life as it has steadily encroached upon every sphere of human affairs. While the developing phenomenon of globalization, advances in information communication technologies, and managerial innovation, the boundaries, scope, and concerns of higher educational institutions have broadened its horizons and are seeking new curriculum designs, which is aligned with the needs of contemporary teaching and learning, as well as with the competencies and protocols of workplaces. Thus, universities and higher education institutions nowadays are expected to and have an urgent need to provide transitional education that highlights these issues and helps students face today's complex changing world. It would not be going too far to say that the integration of technology into the classroom is now widely accepted at a great number of higher educational institutions. Foreign language classrooms have been no exception, with a number of studies focusing on computer-assisted language learning, the CALL, increasing dramatically over the past decade. So the CALL research has focused on various areas. In the present study, I will try to shed the light on one aspect of the CALL, which is flipped learning, investigating the effects this approach has on self-perceived attitudes of higher education actors while teaching in such an environment, and using the SHAC methodology, share, help, ask, command, within this mode of instruction that seems to improve and increase the collaboration processes amongst students through classroom and online activities. Therefore, the purpose of this research actually was to inquire upon professors' lived experiences of SHAC methodology in flipped learning contexts. So this research was held using surveys and class observations of English language professors at higher education institutions that adopt this flipped mode of instruction. The observed data was actually in a form of direct non-participant semi-structured and field notes. And as far as the written data was used using 2 open-ended surveys, multiple choice questions, and open-ended questions. So the findings of this research depict that most of the professors have revealed that students have developed their interaction, increased their engagement, and boosted their collaboration skills. So let's first deal with the definition of flipped learning. Well, flipped learning actually is a recent model of teaching and learning implemented in the educational arena. So it is a way that is transforming the paradigm of traditional teaching and replacing it by this innovative and student-centered way of teaching and learning. According to Flipped Learning Network, flipped learning is a pedagogical approach in which direct instruction moves from the group learning space to the individual learning space, and the resulting group space is transformed into dynamic, interactive learning environments where the educator guides students as they apply new concepts and engage creatively in the subject matter. In a simple definition, let's say, flipped learning is an approach to teaching in which explanations of the textbooks, which would normally be conducted during the class time, are provided to students via media, such as videos or printed material before classes, And these explanations guide students in their preparation of the class, in which they do the practice exercises and tasks under the direct supervision of the teacher. So in a flipped learning context, so the direct instruction is delivered individually, usually through, not exclusively through teacher-created videos. And this time shifts then frees up the face-to-face for richer, more meaningful learning experiences for students. Let's move now to speak about flipped learning essentials. So flipped learning cannot take place unless 4 pillars are to be incorporated in the practice of teachers. So according to Flipped Learning Network, flipped learning requires the following 4 pillars to be implemented: the F, which refers to flexible environments; L, the learning culture; I, intentional content; and P, professional educator. So let's start first with the first pillar, which is flexible environments. So the flexible environments requires the integration of a variety of learning modes and the rearrangement of the learning spaces to support learners in their learning process and to accommodate the lessons to their needs. So the first pillar necessitates these 3 fundamental rules. First, to establish spaces and time frames that permit students to interact and reflect on their learning as needed. Second, to continually observe and monitor and circulate around classroom as to monitor students to make adjustments as appropriate. And third, to provide students with different ways to learn content and demonstrate mastery. Second, learning culture is the second pillar of flipped learning. So this has to do actually with shifting the interests towards students and to make of them the center of the learning process. And this, of course, helps in creating an interactive environment where learners have plenty of opportunities to interact, participate in discussions actually, and evaluate their learning in a way that allows them to self-reflect and make the learning more meaningful and personalized. So this pillar also requires 2 rules to be successfully applied. The first one is to give students opportunities actually to engage in meaningful activities without the teacher being the central. So here it refers to student-centeredness. And second, to scaffold actually these activities and make them accessible to all students through differentiation and feedback. Third, intentional. Let's speak actually about intentional content. So the intentional content deals with how educators continually make research and think of ways to help students develop conceptual understanding as well as procedural fluency. So they choose materials with meticulous care while being attentive to details onto what students learn and how they learn it. So intentional content is meant to maximize classroom time in order to adopt methods for student-centeredness, active learning strategies depending on the grade level and subject matter. So the 3 rules that this pillar depends upon are: first, to prioritize concepts used in direct instruction for learners to access on their own. Second, to create and curate relevant content, typically videos here for students. And a third, to differentiate to make content accessible and relevant to all students. The last pillar is professional educator. So here, the last pillar upon which this mode of instruction is founded actually deals with the fact that it's a bit demanding, it's a bit challenging. So teachers here have to continually observe their students as they're participating in classroom activities. They should provide them with instant and constructive feedback and assess their work on a very regular basis. So here, the metacognition process is a part and parcel of this stage because the teachers become more reflective in their practice. They connect probably with other educators who are also implementing the flipped learning to improve their instruction and to provide constructive criticism for each other. Let's move on now to speak a bit about student-centeredness. So it goes without saying that flipped learning allows for active learning, where the students are in charge of their own learning. So here the roles of the teacher changes actually from the traditional sage on a stage to guide on a side. So this emphasizes the tremendous shift, the teacher's role being that of a guide and a facilitator rather than a provider of knowledge and information. Therefore, the most important role is being played by students, for they are actively engaged in their learning. They interact with their peers, ask problematic questions, and make their learning experience more meaningful and more interesting. So student-centered learning is the second component of the successful learning environments, where there is a shift from teachers being on the stage to students taking a lead role. Previously, the classroom environment was dominant by teachers being in the center of the teaching learning process. So they either lectured or they gave presentations. And despite the fact that teachers presented very well, students can still be disengaged or they could lose interest in learning. Even when this is done well, there are often some students who are disengaged in the learning process. So this philosophy has disappeared, for the paradigm has shifted towards putting much emphasis on the learners rather than on teachers. Let's move on to peer collaboration and SHAC methodology. So we said that SHAC refers and stands for S sharing, H helping, S asking, and commenting. So this SHAC methodology has transformed students from mere IDs consumers to IDs producers. So the peer collaboration refers to how students learn from each other, how do they collaborate, they cooperate together, either in pair work or group work. And the SHAC refers actually to the different activities that students do when they interact with each other. They share their knowledge and information. They help their classmates when they are stuck and they're in need of help. They ask actually mystifying questions and looking for answers from different perspectives. And finally, they comment on important and significant topics while expressing their minds and events in their opinions freely. Therefore, so the idea of this approach revolves around the idea that students receive visual lectures before a lesson, and the classroom time is spent on doing the SHAC activities. So this latter allow for more important tasks and activities that are engaging for students, such as discussion of concepts, answering questions, clarifying complex or hard to understand information and content. And actually this atmosphere allows for more active and engaging learning environments, and such classroom environment and activities frees up the class time for teachers and presents learning choices to students rather than just informing them in a sit and listen format. So this entails that when students are studying in the classroom, when they are asked to continually learn on their own and be responsible of their learning process, they become more stimulated and engaged. Let's deal now with the findings of the study. So the findings reveals that one fundamental aspect of the classroom flip has been achieved, which is actually that of investing the class time and the in-class activities on providing students with ample of opportunities of interaction, debate, and discussion. And undoubtedly, the students through flipped learning approach have started learning in a way that favors interaction, peer collaboration, cooperative learning activities, and through the chat, so the students actually could share their thoughts and opinions. They provided help and aid to their peers and classmates whenever they were asked to. And also students could ask questions and get them answered either from their partners and from their teachers. So the teachers here and professors actually have felt that there is a huge improvement in terms of student skills, especially when they were circulating, monitoring the classroom. They could give instant feedback, constructive feedback to students. They could help students whenever needed, and they were there. So the students could hear various comments and viewpoints from different students, and this in itself was perceived as an added value for students could have a general idea on how their peers view the things, and based on which evidence improved, they formed their opinions. This variety of perspective facilitated the comparison of ideas and the formation of new ideas and opinions, and most of the professors' responses emphasized on the fact that the discussions are better run when the students, they watch the videos actually before coming to the classroom, and when they do make research and come prepared to the classroom. So one key element and aspect of successful implementation of the flipped learning is that the students have to come prepared to the class. So they had to listen to watch the videos, listen to the textbook, and read every materials that are provided by the teachers, and come prepared to the classroom in order to make the discussion run as fruitfully as possible. Next. So in a nutshell, let's move on to the conclusion. So it could be deduced that based on students' comments and answers, and on it seemed that these students up in which the study was conducted, actually they've achieved better learning outcomes. They increased their motivation and devotion to learn English, and most importantly, they developed better attitudes towards learning English in general. So the teachers were really satisfied, so their satisfaction increased, and using this mode of instruction, and held a positive attitude towards the teaching and learning activities in general. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Assia Boili, for your presentation. As a summary, Ms. Boili shared with us her project that dealt with research on teachers' perceptions when it comes to using the flipped classroom methodology in their teachings. She began her presentation by introducing the flipped learning philosophy by addressing the four most important pillars of flipped learning, which are flexibility, having a learning culture, intentional contact, and teachers being professional educators. And by this, she further explained that the teacher's role and the student's roles both change. The teacher is no longer at the center of the learning enterprise, rather the student is at the center. In further explaining this, she evoked the SHAC methodology, which is an abbreviation for sharing, helping, asking, and commenting, which makes the learning experience more interactive and more student-centered, which allows for more collaboration. The results of the study were that most teachers noticed that competencies of deep learning, critical thinking were supported by the flipped learning approach, and students clearly benefited from this approach. Now, without further ado, I give the floor to Ms. Khalwa Nawal. Mr. Dihi is no longer with us, but I think Ms. Khalwa Nawal is going to be presenting instead.
Yes, Sarah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
I just would like to share my slides. The problem is that I cannot share my slides.
Maybe Professor Zimani can help us.
C'est bon, vous pouvez y aller.
Can I do it now? All right, yes, it's working. It's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So here the presentation I am delivering today is entitled Learning and Teaching with the Technology in Higher Education. So first of all, I'm going to share with you the main points I'm going to be talking about, okay, or the main points of this presentation, which are, first of all, higher education outputs and profiles, minds to face the 21st century, challenges, and merits of ICT and how it can promote the four highest levels of thinking. And second, ICT at the university, innovative practices, distance versus presence, two distinct words with distinct profiles and identities, blending the two words, flipping roles, and learning scenarios. Okay, so these are the main points. So attending a university is an exciting time for students to live independently away from home. In the meantime, it is a valuable opportunity to develop their academic and soft skills. One of the most important skills to develop in students is their independence or autonomy. That is to say, students should be able to study independently without that much guidance from teachers. Additionally, students should develop important skills like problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, emotional intelligence, decision-making, communication, and flexibility. Here we have Howard Gardner identified 5 minds to face the new challenges of the 21st century, namely the disciplined, the synthesizing, the creating, the respectful, and the ethical mind. Students are supposed to act as creating minds to think outside the box and go beyond existing knowledge and synthesis. The first and the second mind, that means the first and the second mind, to pose new questions, offer new solutions, fashion works that stretch existing genres or configure new ones. The university context is a suitable place to reach these outputs and develop students' soft and life skills, chiefly with the advent of technology. Using ICT in higher education has various merits, chiefly that they help meet the 21st century skills, especially when learners become reflective, independent, autonomous, and thus learn at their own pace and using different learning styles. The presence of ICT in higher education encourages new ways of learning and creates new paths of teaching. Additionally, ICT promotes the 4 highest levels of thinking: applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. For example, the effective use of ICT in education requires discussing, testing, explaining, and justifying why the use of a certain technological device is likely to produce solutions to problems learners may encounter. The biggest challenge of the use of ICT in education lies in the pedagogical sphere. We should not use technology for the sake of using it solely. It is an irrelevant act to use technology to deliver content and perpetuate the system of education that aims to fill learners with knowledge rather than helping them to explore their creative potential. Thus, creativity should be at the top of learners, the top of teachers' pedagogical concerns when using ICT in designing their courses. This leads us to ask the main following question. What is the best pedagogical philosophy to adopt while using technology in the teaching and learning process? And how innovative are we to use these technological devices innovatively? And what innovative practices may lead to promote students' high order thinking skills? Here I'm going to try to answer in the second part of this presentation some of these main questions. And the second part here we have ICT at the university innovative practices. The advent of technology in higher education has created 2 distinct words with distinct profiles and identities: the word of distance and the word of presence. In the word of distance, and thanks to the merits of technology, students can learn remotely without having to attend the course physically. Such way of learning depends largely on learners' intrinsic motivation and teachers' regular follow-up of their students' progress and improvement. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected educational systems worldwide, students around the globe, and students have found themselves in a totally different learning sphere where technology seems to play a decisive role to ensure students' education and training. Distance learning was a real failure, and parents reported that it did not work. In the word of the presence, we have the traditional methods of teaching, the face-to-face instruction, where the teacher is a sage on the stage. It is a space where overloaded curricula, authoritarian schools, convergence and conformity, rigid textbooks, cultural paradigms, time constraints, and recall-based assessment seem to suffocate any attempt to allow students to explore their creative potential. So we are in a situation of tension between 2 words, that is the presence and distance. The best way to get out of this awkward situation is to look for a third space where we may mingle the presence and the distance, where we can blend the benefits of face-to-face and online learning and thus flip the roles and invert the traditional ways of teaching. But how can we do it, and what are the benefits of such blending? So here I'm going to list some of these benefits, okay, of blending distance and presence learning. First, we have students are likely to develop their autonomy. So autonomy is the first benefit. They can they take responsibility for their own learning and learn to learn. So here I suggest a scenario. We have, while students work online, they may watch an online lecture, review online course material, read digital text, participate in an online discussion, and perform research. These activities require higher level of learners' autonomy. When learners are autonomous and independent, they have the opportunity to work at their own pace to gain valuable information about their own learning that they can carry with them for life. So it's lifelong learning process. In case they need help, they can ask for their teacher's guidance. So here, instructional scaffolding, the teacher's help. The second benefit is students enhance their critical thinking. So it's critical thinking skills. Since teaching is done online and learning takes place in the classroom learners have sufficient time to reflect upon the course content. And here I suggest a second scenario. At home, learners have sufficient time to reflect upon the course content. In the classroom, the classroom may serve as a platform that will enable both teachers and learners to establish an environment of thinking and reflection. Learners look for good questions to ask during class time, and the teacher will have enough time to answer these questions and trigger others. Additionally, students engage in debates, discussions, projects, presentations, station learning, and lab experiments. And the third benefit, which is creativity. Creativity is the ability to produce work in both novel and that is both novel and appropriate. Students will get the chance to find creative ideas through an act of combination. Through working on problem-solving tasks, students should be encouraged to come up with new perspectives and new possibilities. The classroom will be an opportunity, an appropriate space to enable students to dream, fantasize, imagine, tell stories, and ask what-if questions to explore hypothetical possibilities and elicit creative ideas. And the fourth benefit is students develop their collaborative and communicative skills. So here we have collaboration and communication skills. And as a suggested scenario here, students have more time to work collaboratively during class time through group projects and peer mentoring. For example, the teacher assigns a video about the past simple tense. He asks the students to take notes and bring that information into class. The following day, during class time, he may put his students in groups and has them draw mind maps, charts, or tables, and make lists of regular and irregular verbs with clarifying examples. In this example, students practice new skills and reinforce content. Teachers can also use in-class group work as a form of assessment to use instead of standardized tests that kill students' creativity. And to sum up, blending the benefits of face-to-face instruction and online learning is likely to help meet the 21st century skills, namely the 4 C's, which are communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. If teachers look for more time to focus on their learners, develop their autonomy, creativity, and critical thinking, they just need to opt for harmonious blending of presence and distance using technology, but prioritizing pedagogy in a wise way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Khalwa, for this very informative presentation.
Yes.
So Ms. Khalwa presented the university learning as a new way, or the best way in the best context for independent learning, and highlighted ICTs as a very encouraging way to allow for learning, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and engaging in creativity. In engaging with pedagogy for learning in the university, she suggested a middle ground meeting point between e-learning and face-to-face learning, which is blended learning and flipped learning, which allow for competencies and skills of autonomy, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration and communication. And she thankfully suggested many concrete scenarios whereby each one of the following competencies can be fostered inside and outside the classroom. So before moving on to the second part of the panel, I would like to invite everyone, if you have any questions for any of the 3 presenters we have had so far. I think there is a question for Professor Houat. Yes. You have, Professor Houat, you have a question from a Miss Asma Ghurdu, and her question is, how can the students and the teacher cooperate when the student has problems in terms of communication skills?
Yes. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, dear students, for your question. I think that concerning the problem of communication, I don't know if you are talking about via the platform in online course or in class. In my case, if it is the problem is in remote learning, I think that really I had these types of problems with my many students. They have problem communicating, whether with the teacher or with their colleagues. And they told me, plainly and honestly, they told me, madam, we have some problem communicating. If we compare ourselves with other classmates, we cannot do the same. So I try to open for them this forum content forum for these types of questions. And sometimes I found that their colleagues help them with some sharing some references of video about communication skills. And sometimes when they see their colleagues interacting, they also motivate themselves and they contribute. And I reassure them and tell them, if you make mistakes, no problem, just start communicating with your colleagues or with your teacher, and because we learn through mistakes. So this type of students who have these types of problem, they should always be emotionally, supported. And usually I found many of my students teaching their colleagues via these tools of interaction, whether in a forum or other chat rooms. So usually these problems are solved in my case. So and showing empathy with these people is very important at the beginning. And I don't know if I have answered your question. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I think you have clearly answered Ms. Ghurdou's question. If we have any other questions, please either write your questions in the chat box, or if you want, you can unmute yourself and ask the question to the presenter that you would like. If we do not have any comments or questions, then maybe we can move on to the next section of the panel. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the second section of the panel is going to be dedicated to the integration of soft skills into education in Morocco. I now give the floor to our first presenter, Ms. Fatem Zahra Zouali. The floor is yours. Fatem Zahra, if you can please unmute yourself.
Right. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Fatem Zahra, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, first I'd like to thank the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity to share the results of a study that I carried on the incorporation of soft skills in English classes. So we're going to, in this study, we dealt with teachers and students' perceptions. So our presentation will be outlined as follows. First, introduction, then literature review, methodology, shed light on the findings of the study, we're going to have a discussion and a conclusion by the end. So as you all know, the world has known some drastic measures and had taken some drastic measures in order to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. This situations led people all around the world to be so careful and to move or suggest some solutions in order to contain the pandemic and at the same time to continue the pedagogical continuity. So there was a shift to a new normal. We have here the context of the research, which is related to education. So governments around the world have to implement measures in order to contain the pandemic. And as a result, 1.6 billion learners around the world were not able to attend their schools according to the statistics by the UNESCO. So there was a solution which is moving to remote learning. At first it was 100% online learning. Then in the following year of the pandemic, there was a shift to blended learning that emerged as a flexible solution offering students the opportunity to continue their studies at home via different technological tools. So at this situation, students were faced with a new learning environment, which led them to feel a challenge to deal with the new situation that they weren't familiar with. At this time, students had to be equipped or had to use some skills in order to deal with the new learning environment. So there was growth for some skills that are called soft skills, as already mentioned by my colleagues and defined. So in this study, our purpose is to explore how Moroccan teachers of English as a foreign language incorporated soft skills in their online classes and identify at the same time the most important skills that are needed for leading a successful online learning experience for students. In order to respond to this situation or problem of research, we have asked the following questions. So what are the most effective strategies to incorporate critical thinking in online English classes? How often do teachers integrate critical thinking strategies in their classes, and what tools do they use for incorporating them? And the third question is, what soft skills the students needed the most to overcome the challenges faced in the new learning environment? So for the hypothesis, first, it is hypothesized that the most efficient strategies for developing critical thinking are the ones that require higher order thinking abilities from students. Number two, there is a positive correlation between the number of critical thinking workshops attended by students and the frequency of use of critical thinking strategies in their classes. And the third hypothesis is that the most important soft skills needed during the emergency were the digital literacy and the community skills. So for the literature review, we have mobilized the following models. The first is for soft skills structure by Binkley, so the 21st century framework. And the second one is the model for blended learning method by Graham, 2006. So for the soft skills, the model that was presented by Binkley classifies the soft skills into XAF model. For XAF, it stands for knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and ethics. And they were categorized into some categories. We're going to discover them here. The first one, we have the ways of thinking that include creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, learning, and innovation. The second category for that was communication and collaboration. The third one, which is entitled Tools for Working, and it includes the ICT and information literacy. And the last category is living in the world, which includes citizenship, life and career, and personal and social responsibility. So for the second model for our theoretical background, it is the blended learning by Graham, in which he states that blended learning is a model learning method, and it is a combination of face-to-face and online learning methods that maximize student thinking skills development. So in this, or according to Graham, the educational technology employed can be either learning management systems, social media, or even educational platforms. So there are, according to the previous studies, some researchers have gathered certain features for the blended learning, and that are, so according to the authors that you have on the left, there are some features for blended learning that are self-paced learning, supporting collaborative e-learning, the environment or the blended environment that support discussion, those that support knowledge and knowledge constructs, and the ones that support feedback and reactions. So here, for the conceptual framework, we try to identify and or define some notions that are related to the study. So first, the in-person learning, problem solving, brainstorming. Then we have the open-ended questions as strategies for critical thinking, peer teaching again, and the last one, it is teamwork within the category of collaboration. Now let's move to the methodology and data collection and analysis. So for our sampling, we opted for a mixed approach. So we had to collect some quantitative and qualitative data. For the sampling for students, we worked on Wadahab High School in Utah, and we gathered about 87 answers from students. For teachers, there was a questionnaire or a survey for teachers all over Morocco, and we collected 45 answers. Then we had to interview some colleagues and teachers from the Oriental Academy. So for the sampling, it is the stratified sampling, since the students and teachers belong to the category. For example, students, they belong to some categories, either are in the Common Core, the first year of baccalaureate and the second year. They are again classified according to streams, whether physics or maths or arts and literature. For teachers also, they are classified according to their the school subject they teach and the academy they belong to. So here it is a case study and the hypothetical deductive, since we started with advancing hypotheses to be checked later. So here you can see the structure of Wadahab High School in terms of the number of students and the classes that we have in terms of the year 2020 and 2021. So here we just try to summarize the approach and tools. So for the participants, high school students and English teachers, for the duration of the study, it was 1 year. The previous year of schooling, okay, 2020 and 2021, we gathered data through a web-based survey via Google Form, and then we shared the instruments via Facebook. So for the data analysis, since the study is mixed, we use both SPSS statistics and QDA minor for the qualitative data. So for the questionnaire, it contains 4 rubrics. We have demographics, the effectiveness of strategies, the assessment, and the frequency of use. And here you can see the different rubrics or sub-rubrics that tackles the questions asked. So here, there are some sample of questions that were asked for teachers. The first one, to encourage critical thinking and here it was Likert, a 5-point Likert scale in which teachers respond via effective. For example, if the lowest score, it was not effective at all, and the highest one, it was very effective in order to evaluate the strategies that they use in their English classes. The second question, it was list any critical thinking and problem strategies that you think are important and that were not mentioned in the previous list. Then for the assessment, so we talked about their expectations. What do they expect from students, and how often do they use the critical thinking and problem solving strategies in their classes? Again, for students, we asked teacher about the skill that better develop students' soft skills in class, whether it's grammar, vocabulary, function, or the 4 skills. So here there are other questions. So what soft skills do you incorporate in the online teaching? What tools do you use for online teaching? And what digital features do you adopt for soft skills development? For the students, we opted for a questionnaire in Arabic to facilitate the task. We tried to translate the sub-skills and asked students to share their perceptions regarding the experience of blended learning. So in terms of tools and the efficiency or the importance of these strategies or the skills that they needed, then their preference toward the types of learning they experience, whether it's in person or online or both. Here we have the findings. So concerning the participants are teachers. So we had the responses from teachers from different academies in Morocco, as you can see here in this chart. The majority of teachers were from the Oriental Academy. Then once asked about the efficiency of the strategies to incorporate critical thinking and problem solving, here there was about 22 strategies, and I have shared with you the top five ones according to their order of efficiency. So the first one, I asked you to evaluate evidence from different perspectives, writing collaboratively in a wiki space, identifying a real-world problem and evaluating its possible solutions, using creative projects involving a variety of materials, and the last one, justifying positions and answers with evidences, whether they are verbal or written analysis. Here, once asked about suggesting more strategies to incorporate critical thinking, that was the answer from teachers. And you can see here that debates and making projects are higher with 11%. We tried to make this more clear via content analysis. So we can see here in this cloud or in this word cloud, the importance of some strategies to teachers for incorporating these soft skills. Now let's check the hypotheses. So the first one, as if you remember, was the most efficient strategies for developing critical thinking are the ones that require higher order thinking abilities. So here we check that debates, making projects, for example, and working collaboratively in wikis are really strategies and are activities that require high order thinking. So in this case, the first hypothesis was approved. The second one here, so as you can see, we asked teachers to share their perceptions towards the tools that they used for maintaining or the continuity or the pedagogical continuity. We have WhatsApp with 48%, followed by Facebook and Microsoft. So there are no LMS as suggested by Graham, or there are no learning management system used in this case, except Microsoft Teams that still not responding to the requirements. For the question related to the best skill to develop critical thinking, so teachers answered that reading is highly ranked in order to develop critical thinking strategies. We think that this answer was because reading requires some higher order thinking, and there are different questions, either open-ended questions that require justification, sometimes inferencing, and which made teachers assume that reading is the most efficient skill to develop these skills or these soft skills. So now here we asked teachers to tell us what are the soft skills that are incorporated in their online classes. So the answer that the four skills are communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving are ranked the first on the top of the strategies. And we're going to see that these strategies at the same time are the ones that are measured by students too. So here we have so the digital features that teachers use for incorporating soft skills. As you know, in any blended learning environment, or online learning environment, there are some tools in order to make students learn and do their activities. For example, forums, the wikis, the chat spaces. We can talk even about the evaluation workshops. And here when asked, the teachers revealed that only chat space were mostly used for incorporating these soft skills. Here we have the, we just want to see the correlation, whether there is a correlation or relationship between the number of critical thinking workshops that teachers attended and the frequency of use of critical thinking. And as you can see, according to the statistic, we have 0.233, which is average to low in terms of the importance of the relationship between the two variables. So here, the second hypothesis, there is a positive correlation between the number of critical thinking workshops attended by students and the frequency of use of critical thinking strategies. We assume that there was a low positive correlation between these two variables. So this hypothesis is again approved, partially approved. Now for the findings related to the frequency of use of critical thinking, here you can see that most teachers answered by sometimes. So how often do you use critical thinking and problem solving strategies in your class? The answer, or most teachers answered by sometimes to seldom, frequently. So still teachers do not widely use these soft skills in their English classes. Here we have the answers for students related to the tools that they used for the online learning. So in Wadahab High School, they opted for Microsoft Teams with 41%. WhatsApp again with 82%. So it was mostly used by all teachers, including English teachers. Now, once asked about the learning models, the students answered that they preferred, with 65%, they said that they preferred the in-person learning, while 28% of students said that they preferred both modes of learning, and some students opted for remote learning only. So here we can say that the preferences for in-person learning here by students was because teachers didn't take time, and due to the circumstances that most of us were living, teachers didn't take time or enough time to devise and conceive some good learning environments for students where they can get a good idea and right idea about what is blended or remote learning. So here, for the order of soft skills that were shared by students in terms of their importance to them. So here, as you remember, we translated these skills for students to choose and to opt for their importance to them. They answered that collaboration and teamwork are the most important, followed by communication, collaborative problem solving, and metacognition, in addition to ICT literacy, the adaptation to change, information literacy and creativity, and personal and social responsibility. Local and global citizenship was ranked last. So we can assume that the most important soft skills needed for emergency online learning and during the new normal are not digital literacy and community skills, but the learning skills that are collaboration, communication, problem solving, and metacognition. So this hypothesis again was rejected. So for the discussion, by the end of this study, we can say that the blended learning is a solution to ensure the pedagogical continuity, since it supports collaborative learning and helps students learn at their own pace with various resources, including videos, for example, the chatting, there are some chat spaces, and making projects collaboratively in wikis. So in order to better the online learning experience, we should work on providing instant feedback for students, trying to make them work more collaboratively online and provide some online tutoring. So here, for the implementation, we suggest them to make this blended learning more feasible and used by most teachers during the new normal circumstances. We think that there should be a room for incorporating the digital tools in the normal circumstances. Okay, so we need to try to include or opt for online learning as long as the in-person classes of course, to make or to satisfy the needs of students who are already digital natives. So again, for soft skills, there should be a room for teaching them in all the school subjects, only in English. We saw that for teachers, they just sometimes use them, and it isn't enough to produce or to just make students acquire the necessary skills that are required by the job market. So for better insights of this study, we suggest to have non-qualitative data on the importance of soft skills in online learning in future research. So these are the references that were used in this study. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatem Zahra, for this very interesting presentation. To reiterate what Ms. Fatem Zahra's presentation was about, she began by setting the scene for the no learning experience, which began with the COVID-19 pandemic, which uncovered a skills gap within Moroccan education. And so her main questions were related to what are the key skills that are needed and how can these key skills be implemented. The main frameworks that she worked with are the K-SAVE model and the blended learning model. The results of her research on teachers' perceptions and students' perceptions were as such. Critical thinking skills teachers saw are better supported through projects, introducing projects to the learning, collaboration, and they also viewed reading as supportive of critical thinking skills. The most important soft skills that teachers perceive of are communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving. As for students, they still prefer face-to-face education as opposed to blended or remote learning. They view the most important skills, not the digital kind, but rather skills that are related to collaboration, communication, problem solving, and ICT literacy. I hope I summed up this presentation correctly. I now give the floor to my colleague Munya Moomin, which is now going to present the results of a project that we have been working on. Munya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Is the audio clear?
The audio is clear, but we cannot see your screen.
Okay, so I'll try to share my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it clearly and we can hear you clearly, so you may proceed.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. We're pleased to participate in the 5th edition of the International Conference on Technologies, Education, and Creativity. And today we'll be discussing the issue of 21st century skills with regard to change readiness of the Moroccan University, a question that my colleague Sarah and I have been interested in addressing in our study. After a brief introduction, we're going to present the context and objectives of our study. Then we're going to talk about the research questions and hypotheses. We're also going to explain the theoretical approach as well as the methodology used in our study. Then we're going to highlight some key results before concluding. In fact, it is challenging for Moroccan public institutions of higher education to cope with current disruptions unless they are willing to create an auspicious climate for individuals to learn and thrive. So the issue of learning and development becomes the cornerstone of the Moroccan tertiary education system, and that is reflected in different reforms that target human resource development. On the other hand, it is evident that the unpredictable disruptions that hit Moroccan universities in March 2020 have transformed the teaching learning perspective from future action into urgent action. So our research aims to identify the key skills necessary for a successful digital transformation. And we also aim to provide a framework that will foster a learning culture among both students and faculty members. To meet these objectives, we raised the following questions. The first one is, to what extent does soft skills development prepare Moroccan university students to cope with hard digital transformations? And how do faculty members perceive change in Moroccan universities? Hypotheses emanate from these questions. First, we posit that learning skills have a positive effect on students' cognitive readiness for change. We also assume that life skills have a positive effect on students' emotional readiness for change. Then we posit that literacy skills have a positive effect on intentional readiness for change. And we assume that faculty members have positive perceptions about change readiness in Moroccan universities. So our research questions and hypotheses are framed by the conceptual model of the types and dimensions of the 21st century skills and the multidimensional theory of change readiness that involves the cognitive, emotional, and intentional dimensions. As you can see here, the 21st century skills are sorted into three categories. The first category, labeled learning skills, concerns ways of thinking and ways of working, and includes some skills such as communication, cohesion, and teamwork. The second category is literacy skills, and it concerns tools of working and involves some skills like information, media, and ICT literacy. The third and last category is labeled life skills, and it is related with how people live in the world. This category covers skills such as adaptability, leadership, and accountability, for example. So the theory of change readiness explains the individual and collective perceptions of change with regard to the cognitive, emotional, and intentional dimensions. So people are cognitively ready or prepared for change when they think that change is needed. They are also emotionally prepared for change when they feel that change is beneficial to their everyday work performance, for example. Groups and organizations are intentionally ready for change when they are willing to contribute to change or to embrace change. So our study, we used a mixed methods design based on a quantitative and qualitative data collection and analysis. The quantitative data was collected using the organizational change questionnaire that we disseminated among faculty members and students that we recruited using non-probability or purposive sampling, which is appropriate for mixed methods research, since it allows the selection of the sample, for example, a group of people, cases, or organizations, for instance. So the quantitative data was analyzed using the SPSS software. As for the qualitative data, we have scheduled semi-structured interviews with faculty members and students. The organizational change questionnaire includes 7 dimensions that explain the process and climate of change, as well as 3 dimensions that concern the cognitive, emotional, and intentional readiness for change. We used a 5-point Likert scale, ranging from 1 strongly disagree to 5 strongly agree, to report the respondents' level of agreement with statements on change. So the first questionnaire was disseminated among 40 faculty members who teach English at universities located in the east, west, north, and south of Morocco. We received only 9 responses from faculty members. As you can see here, 44% of the respondents have worked or have gained work experiences of more than 20 years. As far as the process of change is concerned, in relation to the quality of change communication, the findings show that 66.67% of the participants agree that they are well informed about the change that occurs in their workplace. Concerning the climate of change, with regard to faculty members' trust in leadership, the results demonstrate that 77.78% of the respondents admit that they can rely on their superiors for help when they have problems at the workplace. So the second questionnaire was distributed among students who study English at universities from the north, south, east, and west of Morocco. We received only 47%, we received only 47 responses. As you can see here, 53% of the participants are undergraduate students. Some of the key results that concern the students' cognitive readiness or preparedness for change show that almost 66% of students do not agree with the fact that change would have a negative impact on their studies. As for the emotional dimension of change readiness, the results show that 55.32% of the participants admit that they have a good feeling about change at the Moroccan university level. Another result that explains students' intentional readiness for change demonstrates that 74.47% of the respondents are willing to embrace change. So these are the results that we've obtained so far. Currently, we're working on semi-structured interviews with students and faculty members, and we are looking forward to executing the qualitative analysis so that we can support and confirm our hypotheses. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Munya, for your presentation, which dealt with the different dimensions that are related to the readiness of change with regards to both faculty members and students in the Moroccan University. We now have one last presentation, last but not least, of course, by a Mr. I'm sorry, let me pull out the, we have Mr. Hamid Siddiqui with the presentation titled Soft Skills, Hard Students' Voices. It is going to be our final presentation of the day. Again, I remind you to please share your comments and your questions in the chat box. Mr. Siddiqui, the floor is yours. Munya, if you can please stop sharing your screen.
Good afternoon. Am I seen?
Yes,
Hello?
sir, we can see you and hear you clearly. So you may proceed. And Munya, again, please stop sharing your screen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today and welcome. I'm here to talk about the student's voice at school and soft skills. My aspiration is to share with you a set of ideas and reflections on a topic that troubles the peace of mind of everybody in this country. It is that of education being as a human or humanized question, to use a term of Paulo Freire. Allow me first to briefly present an overview of the talk. I have divided my presentation into 3 main points. First of all, I'll focus on school or the educational institution as a dehumanized setting to be remodeled. Second, we'll look at students' voice as a key concept, unfortunately missing or displaced in our educational projects. And finally, I'll talk about soft skills as a scheme or terra firma, solid ground to be cultivated to bring forth an authentic change. Why specifically these 3 points or layers? I suppose by the end of our short journey throughout the paper, we'll get to envision, I hope, the kinship, trinity, if not the symbiosis of these 3 overlapping itineraries. And at the same time, my belief is to stretch to attain together a conceivable image, generic picture, if you like, of our schools in those conditions, without and with the inclusion of these human mechanisms or keys in the educational scene. To make out what it really means to practically rehabilitate our public schools away from the grand narratives. The Moroccan public school is, as you know, discolored by tormenting flaws. These flaws stemming generally from a host of complex factors, a matter which actually renders its environment somewhat unresponsive and oftentimes inhuman. Ironically, the warm human relations, which are what school is basically entrusted to accomplish, are themselves what the very climate of this educational location is lacking. Actually, most of our schools do accommodate, in one way or another, an unfriendly atmosphere. This unfriendly atmosphere is characterized by frequent perverse acts of what might be called problematic behavior. In point of fact, a comprehensive, promising school reform is not to be realized on the ground of one single, unique, sui generis dimension, but it is, as it were, a multifaceted project where various theoretical avenues crosscut. This paper embraces one promising route to help redress such an agonizing, inhospitable state of affairs within the school realm. It explores the far-reaching prospects of giving a voice to students to express themselves about all school matters that concern them. The study advances the hypothesis that empowering students through a meaningful involvement could settle much of troubles of conduct at school. The initial step to regain such misplaced power is to help them have a say. And they claim to be the center of all the educational enterprise. Involving students meaningfully in school life and treating them as real responsible partners can actually bring about the desired change, which a number of reforms up to now have failed to achieve for our schools. If contribution from the side of all the presumed actors is incontestably required, nonetheless, the effective presence of students as real agents at school is a crucial one to stir a decisive educational move forward. Alongside their voice, I dare say, life could gradually come back to school. Rehabilitating the status of students from controlled, tamed subjects to real accountable agents within the school ambiance has often been a weak point in most educational reconsiderations. Students seem to be absent in their presence. True, in their name, almost all the educational reports, surveys, official documents are formulated, conducted with a strong focus on student-centered approaches, cherishing the role of learners in the whole educational process. But on the school ground, they are excluded and marginalized, or at best, poorly included as real operating agents, present only in a tokenistic way. Furniture. Why are students systematically neglected and silenced at school? One of the key terms used by Adam F.C. Fletcher to elucidate such an attitude may be adultism. Adultism is a tendency of adults, of grown-ups, of teachers, to view children and their problems from a biased adult perspective. A substantial educational research has been invested on the social representations of this adult-centric mindset to marginalize and manipulate the youth on the basis of what they consider an immature age. Students' voice could, to a great extent, contribute to the improvement of the school climate, the workings of power relations, as well as the concepts of communication, dialogue, participation, partnership, are all true appellations to fix this inhuman atmosphere. On the other hand, a curious, inquisitive discussion grounded on concept of restorative justice, which is advanced in the theories of education as a way to cope with school disruptive behavior from an angle of fairness, a kind of philosophical shift away from the punitive approach to misbehavior, focusing on accountability of actions and repairing of harm, rather than on the presumed wrongdoer. Its final goal is to reintegrate students back into the school community through caring, communication, and fostering a sense of belonging. Anyway, we're not so much concerned here with exploring the depths and mysteries of misdoings, or misbehavior, or violence at school. Suffice it to say that the strained atmosphere within schools, if it does not generate uncivil behavior at school, it does intensify it. It makes it worse. This leads us to the agonizing question: how to help humanize such an environment? The question sounds a bit romantic. Yes, it is romantic, in fact. And in the long run, education is an act of love, an act of freshness, spontaneity, an affirmative, forceful love, inspiring, critical, challenging. Throughout his writings, especially in the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire asserted that education should aim at establishing a world where it would be easier to love, a real natural feeling, not an act of generosity. By love here, it is not a love of hugs and kisses. Instead, it is a love that is rooted in a committed willingness to struggle persistently with purpose in our life and to intimately connect that purpose with our true vocation, to be human. Quote, a humanizing education from Paulo Freire. A humanizing education is the path through which men and women can become conscious about their presence in the world, the way they act and think when they develop all of their capacities, taking into consideration their needs, but also the needs and aspirations of others. Social injustice does dehumanize us, destroying our capacity to love ourselves, to love each other, and to love the world. Even well-meaning teachers, through their lack of critical moral leadership, actually participate in disabling the heart, minds, and bodies of their students. An act that disconnects these students from the personal and social motivation required to transform their world and themselves. By the same token, through the feelings of compassion, empathy, warmth, responsiveness, we as teachers could contribute to rehumanize a dehumanized school. To educate in the eyes of Erich Fromm, in his book, The Art of Loving, he says, or he implies, to educate implies a search for the well-being of another, a quest that is similar to love. Without this, the correct term would not be to teach, but to train, to instruct. Whoever educates or teaches without thinking about the benefit of the other is just instructing. The traditional model of education from states only makes machines which act like men and produces men who act like machines. One of the primary roles in our job as teachers, I think, is to soften the atmosphere around the schools. Adults may be destroying humanity at school. Perhaps it is offending to say that, but it is, unfortunately, a striking fact. We do much harm by our conduct. We have to honestly and daringly recognize this, and recognition is the first step. Then it would be easy to straighten up school life after recognition. We have been conditioned to think inside a paradigm, believing that certain things done in education make success and safety. We have grown up in a mindset that we do what we do, what we are trained to do, what we are brought up in is the right path to realize the recommended achievement. Teach the kids to obey authority, to conform, to execute without questions. Kids are safe out there when they submit to authority. Be disciplined and learn your own place when you live, if you want to live in peace. No challenge to avoid danger. In such a way, the functioning of the mind proceeds. I blame you. I hurt you for your goodness. I make you in discomfort because I love you. Those who had experienced pain, abuse at school, especially struggling with math subjects and teachers, feel this pain. Quote from Alice Miller: child abuse damages a person for life, and that damage is in no way diminished by the ignorance of the perpetrator. It is only with the uncovering of the complete truth as it affects all those involved that a genuinely viable solution can be found to the dangers of child abuse. She continues, Alice Miller: one can only remember what has been consciously experienced. Paulo Freire again says, the final virtue, if possible, is the ability to love students in spite of everything. I don't mean a kind of soft, sweet love, but on the contrary, a very affirmative love, a love which accepts, a love for students which pushes us to go beyond, which makes us more and more responsible for our task. Humanization in school in brief considers the individual as an active subject of his perfection. His or her intrinsic value is cherished. The child is not an abstract figure, but a particular person who has his or her own real life. The space of school is to be humanized, where the top-down model of education is avoided. The banking model of teaching, a term coined by Paulo Freire, banking model, he brings forth the analogy of depositing money in a bank. Students become like cashiers or clerks who receive and retrieve knowledge deposited in them when needed. They are not seen as self-thinking, autonomous individuals who think critically. The underlying idea here is that childhood is a long, important period in a person's life. Childhood, as Korczak says, is mountains where the river originates and where it is determined. Without a complete childhood, the whole life of a person is maimed. He should be provided the opportunity to use his energy or her energy, to give him or her the sun, the air, the benevolence, without regard to his merits and faults and virtues and vices. The child is to be admitted as he is. He has a right to participate in discussions, decisions that concern him or her, to express his ideas, to organize his life independently, to conceal his faults, to make mistakes, to play, even to have a mystery of his own. This leads me directly to my next point, students' voice. How to improve students' outcomes. Few schools have decided to go straight to the source and ask the right question and go to the right point, the students. Students' voice increasingly has been discussed in the school reform literature as a potential avenue for improving both student outcomes and school restructuring. Learning generally, as we know, as you know, of course, is inherently a social activity that occurs between people rather than just an individual process. Learning and meaning making occur through the process of students and teachers developing together an alternative frame for student participation in school reform, as Vygotsky said. Students working with teachers and administrators to co-create the path of reform could help youth to meet their own developmental needs and could strengthen student ownership of the change process. Michael Fielding argues that teachers and other adults speak too readily and too presumptuously, arrogantly on behalf of young people. Ignoring student voice results in feelings of alienation, anonymity, and powerlessness, disengagement on the part of the student. This term, student voice, has gained increasing credence as a construct that describes the many ways in which youth might have the opportunity to actively participate in school decisions that will shape their lives and the lives of their peers. Partnering with students to identify school problems and possible solutions reminds teachers and administrators that students possess unique knowledge, important knowledge and perspectives about their schools that adults cannot fully replicate. Dana Mitra identified 3 levels of student voice. At the most basic level, students share their opinions, just sharing, concerning the school problems. At the next level of intensity, the students collaborate with adults.
Mr. Stekhi, excuse me, I apologize for interrupting you, but I'm going to need you to sum up and reach your conclusion. You have 1 minute left.
Just 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to skip on this just to talk about soft skills and go directly to the conclusion. Well, soft skills, well, I'm not going to repeat what he said, maybe just go directly to the conclusion. All right, the paper started from the idea that Moroccan school lacks a human touch in its spaces. This may be largely due to the lack of real communication among its actors. While the child is viewed to be a central actor in the entire educational enterprise, if not a determined agent of success or failure, this process, he seems totally indifferent. Her voice is low or absent at school, even in the few spaces available. Her thoughts, concerns, and suggestions are not taken seriously. The student's voice is an important equation in all schools, and the Moroccan school in particular. Caring for the student's voice may bring back the school's vibration and restore life within the school. The general atmosphere of the Moroccan school is monotonous, inhuman, and static. So the positive involvement of students in school activities may free this atmosphere from this lifeless character. Skip. Before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one final wise saying of Maria Montessori. She said, if salvation and help are to come, it is through the child, for the child is the constructor of man. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. No, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stekhi, for leaving us on such a deep note to reflect on. I will try to very shortly refer to the main key points that Mr. Stekhi referred to. He evoked the idea of a dehumanized educational institution in Morocco. He raised the importance of giving students voice, giving students responsibility, agency, and treating them as accountable, responsible individuals. He raised also the issue of the need for a drastic mindset shift among Moroccan teachers and adopting more empathy, responsiveness, and humanity into their interactions with students. And finally, he referred and emphasized the importance of student-centeredness in the process of rehumanizing Moroccan education. And so with this, we finish with our last presentation of this afternoon. I see that we have a few questions and comments in the chat box. So I will start with the first question we have here. This question is not specifically addressed to any presenter, so anyone is welcomed to answer the following question. I will read it. It is from Ms. Khawla Ballahi, and her question is, do you think that teachers should have different approaches to teaching when it comes to introverted students as opposed to extroverted students? The latter ones are more likely to be active and engaged in class discussions, while the former ones, being introverted students, tend to prefer to work alone and keep to themselves. We've seen that students respond to various teaching methods, but I am curious if these methods take into account students' psychological nature, or if they deal with social anxiety that prevents them from performing as well as their classmates. So are there teaching techniques that cater specifically to introverted students? And thank you. So any of the professors or the presenters or anyone from the audience that is present with us that has a comment or an answer to Ms. Khawla's question, you are welcomed to unmute yourself and provide us with a response. So to reiterate Ms. Khawla's question, it is related to the difference between introverted and extroverted students and how different teaching techniques need to be adopted to cater to both types of personalities. Yes, Mr. Siddiqui, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
1 minute or just 30 seconds? Okay, thank you for the question. Well, the essential message we try to pass here is that school life regains itself. Of course, the question of method is present and should be present all the time. Students are not the same. They have different capacities, they have different, well, they are not the same. So normally, or there are methods, of course, there are theories on that to cater for them individually. The difference between students should be taken into account in teaching. That's what we normally as teachers, as educators, should do. That's it. Well, there are techniques, of course, and well, the technique, there are some students who are slow at understanding, slow at doing things. They should be, attention should be paid to them. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siddiqui, for
the essential question is not the student, is not the method, to my mind. It is the question of caring for the student. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Mr. Adil Abu Hassan, and the question is, it is related to research methodology. The question reads, what is the difference between qualitative semi-structured interviews and structured interviews used in methodology? So the difference in qualitative methodology between semi-structured and structured interviews. Again, this question is not directed to any specific presenter. So if one of the presenters would like to offer an answer, please unmute yourself and provide an answer for the question. So of the presentations that we had, I think Ms. Moomin and Ms. Fatem Zahra, you both mentioned using interviews in your research projects. So if you can clear up this this confusion between semi-structured and structured interviews for our colleague.
First, I wanted to answer Khawla's question, if it's possible.
Of course, go ahead.
Okay, she asked about how to teach and deal with the introvert students. So as far as I'm concerned, and from my own experience, I had some students who are shy and reluctant. They cannot take part in class. And I thought of an idea, which is designing an online class, okay, for them using Canvas platform. So we had some forums where we discussed the content of the lessons, and to my surprise and the surprise of all the students, those introvert students were really successful in terms of sharing good ideas on forums on the platform. So they participated okay, in a good way. They made some good projects, and even their interventions were so relevant to the learning content that we have. So there was a progress. So maybe we think to personalize learning through providing some opportunities for these introvert students to voice their opinions and to express themselves in different ways. If they are reluctant, they are introverts, sorry, and cannot okay, participate as the others do. So there are other solutions to take into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fatem Zahra. Do you have an answer for Mr. I think Al-Hassan? And then we have a question for Mr. Sadiqi from Ms. Asma Ghurdu. Child abuse in the name of love is dreadful, but how can we decrease this phenomenon?
Sarah? Can I answer, Ms. Sarah?
Of course, sir, go ahead.
Well, abuse is an abuse, be it with love or with hatred. It is an abuse. It is a pain. It is an offense. So it should be avoided. And this offense, especially for children, leaves, harm, a trace. While we grow up, it is still there. When we do remember, as Ismail said, we remember just the good things, but at certain times, we remember the abuse, even if it is made with compassion, with love, with passion. So it's not an excuse to abuse someone while you live. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We also have an answer from Ms. Munya Moomen, who I think is suitable as an answer to this question. She says that psychological safety is the key solution to this problem. Creating a safe and flexible context for learning enables learners to be motivated and productive. Do we have any more comments or questions?
Miss Sarah?
Yes, Miss?
Would you please repeat the question that wasn't answered earlier? There was another
The question was, yes, the question was about the difference between qualitative semi-structured interviews and structured interviews in methodology.
In qualitative methods?
Yes.
Okay, so once we talk about the interview, I guess there are 3 parts, not just 2. Okay, so we have the structured, the semi-structured, and non-structured interviews. Okay, once we talk about structured here, the researcher try to plan earlier, okay, the questions that he's or she's going to ask for the interviewees. Okay, all the questions are known, and the respondents know all the questions that they are supposed to answer. Okay, but for the semi-structured, so here some of the questions are already planned, and others that are not planned earlier. Okay, so during the interview, the researcher may think of other questions to be asked. Okay, so here we talk about semi-structured interview. And there is another type, which is the non-structured interviews, and here no questions, sorry, are planned at all. Okay, so there should be just like an inquiry, a spontaneous inquiry for collecting data. I hope I'm right. If there are anyone to maybe who have to clarify the point, we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fatem Zahra, for your answer. Mr. Adil Abul Hassan, I hope this answers your questions and clarifies things for you. We do not have any more questions nor comments left in the chat box. If anyone has another comment or question, you're welcome to unmute yourself and share it with us. If not, then I hereby close this panel. We've reached the end, and I pass the floor back to Professor Azdimani.
Je crois qu'il n'y a pas de questions finalement. Alors je vais juste rappeler un petit peu le programme de demain. On va commencer à 9h30 et bien évidemment il y a 2 sessions, plutôt 3 sessions. La première commence à 9h30 et se termine à 11h. Deuxième de 11h à 1h de l'après-midi et la dernière session de 14h à 15h40. Merci à vous tous et soyez au rendez-vous demain, Inch'Allah. Merci.